Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and this is day 3 or 4? One of those two without NBA basketball. And so obviously the content is going to be a little bit different since there's not basketball to talk about. So in today's video, we are looking back at some NBA draft grades for the 2017 NBA draft over here on Bleacher Report. But really quickly, before we get started, obviously content is going to be a little bit different on this channel, but I am keeping the upload streak alive. I'm going to be putting up a video every single day, but I'm going to need a little bit of help from you guys for ideas. Obviously, I typically talk about news and things like that. There's not a lot of news happening. So if there is a video idea or something that you've wanted for me to talk about in the past and you've never mentioned it, or maybe you have mentioned it, leave it down in the comment section of this video, send it to me on Twitter, whatever. If you've thought about something and just never asked me, I'll take a look at it because I'm definitely going to need some ideas on some stuff to do over the next, however long the NBA is going to be suspended. Okay, here we go. With that said, we're going to start, of course, with the number 1 overall pick, Markelle Fultz of the Philadelphia 76ers. And they're giving the Sixers an A+, which might seem like a bit of a stretch now, right? But at the time, I promise you, this was absolutely the right pick. People loved Markelle Fultz. They thought he was perfect for Philadelphia. That's why they moved up to get him. His ability to play on or off the ball, the shooting stuff, obviously didn't have a ton of team success at Washington, but he had great size, great length, and a ton of skill. And whatever happened to him when he came into the league with his jump shot, whatever was going on in his head, you can blame the Sixers or you can blame Fultz. But an A+ grade here was absolutely accurate and the right call, even though obviously he didn't end up becoming, to this point, the best player in the draft class, as you would hope the first overall pick would be. Moving on now to number 2, Los Angeles Lakers taking Lonzo Ball, and they gave the Lakers an A. This was kind of an inevitable pick at the time just because of all the hype around Lonzo at the time. And the Lakers had just traded away D'Angelo Russell. They brought in Lonzo Ball. Even though LeVar was still very much in the public eye, the Lakers thought that they were going to be able to move on past that. And at the end of the day, he's a really good player, and he's now with the Pelicans, and he was nice trade capital for the Lakers to use in the Anthony Davis trade. Never quite found his stride in LA because LeBron showed up and he kind of had to work on other parts of his game, like becoming a really good defender. But now with New Orleans and with the Pelicans, he's pretty much a perfect fit, and I'm really excited to see what he can do moving forward. So that A is pretty accurate. Moving on now, though, to probably what's the first really interesting grade of this entire article. Jayson Tatum going to the Boston Celtics at number 3 with the grade of a B. And I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that Jayson Tatum is now the best player out of this entire draft class, at least how he has been playing up until this point, especially this season as a scorer, as someone that can be a really good two-way wing, as someone that might be the Boston Celtics' best player right now. Had a really good rookie year. I've talked about this in the past. Second year, had a bit of a slump with Kyrie showing up and everything. But this is absolutely an A+ pick when you also consider the fact that they moved back from 1 to 3, and then they got an extra pick as well that ended up becoming Romeo Langford, if I remember correctly. So this absolutely now has to be an A+ of a grade. And now we get to number 4, a guy that I've talked about pretty recently, Josh Jackson of the Phoenix Suns, and they gave him an A. And this was a pick that made total sense at the time in terms of positions, right? I mean, the Suns had guys on the front court with Dragan Bender, Marquise Chris. They had Devin Booker. They just needed a wing. They needed a strong wing defender, and Josh Jackson looked like he was going to be that guy. Now, he wasn't outstanding at Kansas, but he had a ton of potential, right? Typical one-and-done player that has a ton of potential, a great athlete, needs to work on his skills, but as long as he works hard, he's going to be fine. That just didn't materialize in Phoenix, got into some legal trouble, and is now in Memphis. And his increased level of production there post All-Star break remains to be seen if it is actually a real thing and he's actually improving, or if it's just, him getting more minutes and more opportunities like he always did later in the year in Phoenix. So having this one as an A certainly is not correct, especially when you look at some of the wings that come down later on in this draft class. Moving on now to number 5, DeAaron Fox going to the Sacramento Kings, getting an A-. And I would go as far to say that this is an A and maybe even an A+, because De'Aaron Fox, especially last year, this year is having a really good season as well, but the year before when they were playing so up and down, when they kind of built their style around what De'Aaron Fox does best, was fantastic for this team. So in 2020, I would probably give this more like an A or an A+, considering the fact that, up until this point out of the top 5, this guy is the second best player in the class to this point. So that's really good value with the 5th pick. Moving on now to another really interesting one. Another front court player selected by the Orlando Magic, number 6 overall, Jonathan Isaac, a player that I really like. I just don't know if he's ever going to be able to be as consistent with his play as well as staying on the court to be the kind of high impact player that I think that he can be. Really good defender, tons of versatility, crazy wingspan, can play the 3, the 4, or even the small ball 5 at times. But just like pretty much every single draft pick that has gone to Orlando in the last 5 years, positional fit is a question, and the scheme around these players, as well as having the proper role players, the proper shooting, the proper spacing, and everybody playing in a role that is best for them, just hasn't materialized to this point for Isaac. Because you've got Nikola Vucevic, you've got Mo Bamba, you've got Aaron Gordon, and you've got Isaac. All those guys are really versatile, but when you start bumping them up to playing the 3 more so than they really should be, it's going to limit their production and their effectiveness. So B+ I'm cool with right now because I think he could end up being a really good player, but my issues here more have to do with the magic and the positions they're putting him in more than anything else, and then obviously the health as well. Number 7 now, the Chicago Bulls selecting Lowry Markin, and with a pick that I believe they received in a Jimmy Butler trade on draft night. They gave this pick a C, and this is a really interesting one to kind of regrade and reevaluate because I think Lowry Markin is a really talented player, and I know that people thought that this was a reach at the time, but if he can stay healthy, he's a really good fit as a 4, sometimes small ball 5, can really score the ball, can really shoot it, and I'd be really interested to see him in a situation outside of Chicago. Not that they're going to trade him, it's just that situation is so dysfunctional at the moment, and he can't stay on the floor either, which doesn't help. This is kind of an incomplete for me right now in 2020. I mean, I would give it a grade better than a C just because in terms of the value of some of the players coming after, I'd probably give it more like a B- or a B right now. And then it with, room for improvement, certainly if he can stay healthy and continues to grow and get better. Moving on now, number 8, Frank Ntilikina to the New York Knicks, getting a B+. You're going to see some of the guards that come up later, one in particular, that make this a really, really, really tough pick to swallow for Knicks fans. And I know that there's a corner of NBA fandom specifically reserved for the Frank Ntilikina fan club. I just don't see it. I understand all the things that he does defensively and how good he is defensively, but he's so bad offensively that I just don't understand how he can continue to be defended as, someone that is going to be anything of significance outside of just a rotation piece moving forward for any particular team. So a B+ grade is very generous in my opinion. Here's another guard pick that is really tough to swallow as well, although obviously the Mavericks got great value out of Dennis Smith later on. This one is an A+ grade from Bleacher Report, number 9 overall for Dennis Smith Jr. This is obviously before they drafted Luka. This looked like great value. Dennis Smith looked like one of the most talented players in this draft class, one of the most talented guards in this class. I obviously loved him coming out of college as an NC State fan and alum. I've seen this guy play multiple times in high school in person. I saw him play multiple times in college in person. And it just hasn't worked out for him to this point in the NBA. He's not efficient enough from the perimeter. He is a really good athlete, but doesn't have great size, so he can get to the rim, but when he gets there, finishing can be a little bit tough. Just hasn't found, whatever he needs to find to be successful in the NBA, and obviously moved from a situation in Dallas that could have been to his advantage to now being in New York and not really knowing where his career is going. The Mavs obviously are not going to call this an A+ grade because he didn't end up being anything of significance for their team, but using him as a trade asset in the Kristaps Porzingis trade certainly makes this grade look a little bit better, but it's definitely not an A+ now in 2020. Moving on now to number 10, the Portland Trail Blazers getting Zach Collins as a B+. And again, there's some other players that are going to be coming up later in this class that you probably would rather have than Zach Collins right now. Some of them you would certainly rather have than Zach Collins right now. But I still like this guy's game. It's going to continue to develop. It's not developing at any kind of rapid rate. He's had some injury issues, but I think he has a ton of skill inside. I think he can be a good defender. I think he can be a guy that can stretch the floor as well. I don't know that he's going to be like a high-level starting caliber 4 or 5 man, but I think there's a lot of versatility there, and there's still a lot of things to like if they can get it figured out how to get him and Yusuf Nurkic to play at the same time. If not, then it's going to really limit his effectiveness just because he can't be on the floor as many minutes as you would hope out of a top 10 pick. Moving on now to one that was really disappointing for me, number 11 now, the Charlotte Hornets and Malik Monk, who even before the NBA got suspended indefinitely was suspended indefinitely. They're giving this a B+, and I really thought Malik Monk was going to be like J.R. Smith Jr. I really did. I thought that he had the shot-making ability, he had the length, he had the athleticism to be a really, really good NBA player. Not someone that's going to be an all-star or anything, but that guy that like a Will Barton, J.R. Smith type guy that is going to be able to score the ball. He's going to have some inefficient nights, but he can absolutely shoot the ball. And part of me still believes in him. It just hasn't happened for him at this point. And I don't know, hopefully he finds it eventually, but if not, he's going to find himself on a new team here pretty soon. So this B+ grade I don't think it is all that accurate here now in 2020. Moving on now to number 12, the Detroit Pistons selecting Luke Kennard, who is having a really good season this year, and unfortunately is kind of the last man standing now in Detroit with Blake Griffin's injury and Andre Drummond being traded away. I still think he can be a really good player, certainly as one of the better shooters potentially in the entire league. His value outside of that is questionable. If you have a couple of other really good ball handlers, I don't know how much Luke Kennard is going to be creating for your team, but he's at least going to have a long career in the NBA. The A- grade, I'd probably put it more in a B plus category because of the pick right after him, but still not an awful pick or a grade at the time. Because now we get to number 13, Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz, and they gave this grade a C+, which I watched a lot of ACC basketball. I watch a lot of it every single year, but I specifically remember a lot of Donovan Mitchell because he torched NC State a couple of times, and you could start to see it, right? He was very square. He clearly had great body control. The shot looked like it could be something down the road. Great athlete. Nobody really could have anticipated that he would become, the kind of player that he is now. And certainly this is an A+ home run pick and puts a lot of the previous guard selections before him to shame, whether it's Ntilikina, Smith Jr., Kennard, whoever it is. Every single one of those teams would rather have Donovan Mitchell on their team right now. So the Jazz crushed it with this pick. Has to be an A+ now in 2020. Another pick that looks really good right now, number 14, the Miami Heat, selecting Bam Adebayo, and they gave the Heat, a C for this one as well. And this time last year, you'd say that this was probably like a B+, pretty good value, right, for the Heat. But now that Bam is like an all-star caliber player, potential defensive player of the year guy, this is an A+, absolutely hit it out of the park for the Heat. They traded away Hassan Whiteside, and Bam Adebayo slid right into that starting 5 spot. It looks like a real dominant future piece for them moving forward, someone that's going to continue to grow on both ends of the floor. An absolute dynamite of a pick, A+ here for the Miami Heat. We're going to move on now to a couple of the more interesting ones, at least in my opinion, here down the road. John Collins, who actually they graded pretty well with an A, someone that his fit moving forward is a little bit questionable just because you don't know if he's a 4 or 5. Can he survive on the floor with a rim rolling big at the 5, or is he a long-term 5? I think he's a really productive player, but his value to a team at a winning level is at least slightly questionable. Outstanding athlete, certainly at this pick, number 19 overall, to get a player as productive as him is really good value. So I think the grade of an A is certainly accurate. Harry Giles, still kind of waiting to see what he's going to be. Terrence Ferguson, same thing. Jared Allen is a really interesting one here, all the way at number 22. They gave him a B+. I would argue that this is an A maybe. Jared Allen is a really good player, someone that's going to continue to grow, and that kind of value at number 22 overall is really great. A couple of other guys here later on in the first round that are interesting to look at. OG Anunoby, who has obviously become a really good player for the Toronto Raptors. They gave him an A grade this late in the draft as well. Other than that, not a ton here later on in the draft. Kyle Kuzma, they gave a C-, and Derek White here as well, an A-. So some interesting picks later on, but I think at the end of the day, the legacy of this draft class is most of the guys that got picked at their position early in the draft. There's some players later on that ended up becoming as good or even better as them. When you're talking about Frank Ntilikina and Dennis Smith Jr. being picked early and then Donovan Mitchell being picked after them. When you're talking about guys like Zach Collins being picked early and then Bam Adebayo being picked after them. Even if you want to go within the top 5, Jayson Tatum and DeAaron Fox being drafted behind, at a certain level being drafted behind, Josh Jackson, Alonzo Ball, and Markelle Fultz. This 10 years from now is going to be a super interesting draft class to look back on because there's potentially 4 or 5 all-star level caliber player guys in this class, and it can end up looking a lot like that Jimmy Butler, Isaiah Thomas class, where a lot of the players came a little bit later on, mid-lottery, late first round. Really, really interesting class to look back on. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.